Hello, welcome to Gardener's World on a glorious September day. I'm planting here in the wall garden some Japanese anemones. They flower from July through to October, and this variety, Honorine Jaubert, is fabulous white flowers with these orange centres that are produced on and on for months. They grow in practically any soil, they grow in full sun or part shade. Easy plant, big result. And today I shall be planting a variety of plants here at Longmeadow, designed to attract as many insects as possible into the garden throughout the year. Carol delights in the swathes of grasses and the late season perennials at Pensthorpe in Norfolk.
This is wonderful. You're in the middle of it, you're part of the garden, you're experiencing it, and you just feel part of the whole picture.
Joe has been exploring the magnificent gardens of Marqueyssac in the Dordogne.
So there's no English influence here?
It is not English.
Oh,
I don't think so.
There's a bit of English style here. We like to use our boxes.
Jardin à l'anglaise.
Ah, jardin anglaise, oui.
I love the way that the fennel looks at this time of year. These are all self-sown. The original plant probably put here, 20 years ago now. And it seeds itself everywhere. We pull up some, but leave as much as possible for precisely this effect. Because at this time of year, it's had a whole summer's growing, it's got height, it's got body, but it's also got elegance, and you can see through it. And you get this incredible zinging green cloud of seed heads forming and floating above the border. And the seeds, as they ripen, are a digestive, and I think taste delicious. These grass borders have come on really well in the last couple of months. When you think that they were replanted in late spring, early summer, they're now coming into their own. And I'm going to add some asters to them, because they will work in perfectly with the feel of the planting I want to get here, which is tall, loose, small flowers, and also to invite in as many insects as butterflies as I possibly can, and no plant does it better than asters. Bees need late flowering plants so they can build up their nectar reserves for winter. The first one that I'm planting is Aster umbellatus, or the flat top aster. And it's a particularly tall, woody variety found in North America. And you can see just by popping that in, straight away, these very small flowers, which insects love, and open daisy-like. And if you have an open flower head, it means that an insect can land on it and get at the nectar really easily, rather than one great gorgeous bloom. Looks great to us, but not so good for getting insects in. Now this group looks really handsome as it is. It's working from the moment it's planted, which is always a benefit, because quite often you have to wait a year or two, and it will get better. But there are lots and lots of different asters to choose from. I've just got a couple more. Next is Purple Dome. This is a New York or Novi Belgii aster. And although it likes full sun, like all the New York asters, it can be prone to mildew if it gets too dry. So it is important that I keep the soil well mulched. I'm also planting Little Carlo, which is taller with lilac blue petals and yellow centres, and can be placed in dapple shade. Both of these plants will flower and attract insects well into autumn. And whilst asters are giving us good colour and wonderful food for insects in autumn, I want to do some planting now for next spring, and that's some aconites. Now, aconites are amongst the first flowers to appear at the end of January, beginning of February, and I love those bright little yellow flowers surrounded by a green ruff that open out in the sunshine. And they're best planted in the green, which is to say as plants after they finish flowering. The problem is that they look great as a great drift. And if you want to buy hundreds of aconites or snowdrops, you're certainly looking at hundreds, if not thousands of pounds. So it's beyond most of us. However, you can buy 100 bulbs or tubers just for £10. So it makes much more sense, if you can make them grow, to plant them as tubers now. And I've got some aconites in the spring garden and I want lots more. So I'm going to try and make a shortcut to that process by planting tubers into a container. Now you can see the tubers are these funny little chocolatey things, and they're very dry. And these are a plant that don't like to dry out. So if you're going to grow them either in a container or in the ground, give them a good soak before doing so. Now I've got some here that have been soaking for the last day or so. And that has made them swell up a little bit, and there's much more chance of them growing now like that. So they're good and soaked. A normal peat-free compost, a little bit of perlite in there to help drainage. So we've got those there, and then once they're in the ground, they'll spread really well by seed. And then I can get that drift, and that will build up over the years. But even one plant is good for insects. And Carol has been to the Millennium Garden, Pensthorpe, which not only is wonderful at bringing in a wide range of insects, but also is right at the cutting edge of garden design.
Pensthorpe Nature Reserve covers over 600 acres of farmland and woodland. At its core there are ponds and lakes surrounded by gardens. But it's the Millennium Garden I've come especially to see. After 10 years of evolving, the garden has just been through a process of regeneration. The whole place has been completely replanted. It was designed by renowned plantsman and landscape designer Piet Oudolf in 1999. At over an acre and a half, it was the first major public garden Piet created here in the UK. Usually when you're thinking about a garden on this sort of scale, you think about standing back and looking at it from afar. But this is wonderful. You're in the middle of it. You're part of the garden. You're experiencing it. It undulates up and down and round and about, and you just feel part of the whole picture. There are two incredibly dainty plants here. This lovely Lythrum virgatum, which is a close cousin of a purple loosestrife. And then in the front, this grass called Sporobolus. And I think it's a complete delight. Look at these lovely twinkling little inflorescences. Imogen Chackerts is head gardener here at Pensthorpe. She has the responsibility of taking care of all of it. As well as looking after this vast place, Imogen, I gather you were very instrumental in bringing about these changes that have been made.
Yeah, well, we had to do something with the garden. When I first came here in 2007, it was in need of some attention, as some things were going a little bit rampant and spaces were appearing, so we decided with the owners and myself that it needed a rejuvenation, I guess. So we decided to get in touch with Piet, who's designed the garden, and ask him to come back and consult with us and see what to do with it.
How much stuff went back in?
There's about 70% of the original plants. We cleaned them up and put them back in, and then there's about 30% of new stuff gone in.
You must have completely different combinations
yes,
of
yeah,
things.
it's completely livened up the garden. It's changed the way it looks. It's given it a whole new sort of lease of life, I guess. Yeah. When you look at it, it's become possibly a bit more romantic, a bit more sort of softer.
Yeah, a bit more feminised.
Yeah, a bit more feminised, yeah.
Let's have a look at some of them. This bold, this beautiful sedum. I love this, yeah.
This is a good example of why we did the renovation. We've got some plants at the back, this big persicaria
Yeah.
and the panicum grass in front. There were two plants that getting way too big for themselves and
Well,
taking over the whole bed.
too big for their boots.
Too big for their boots, yeah. So we've added in these aconites and the sedums.
Yeah.
So very popular with the butterflies and
Yeah.
bees.
I mean, that was one of the reasons people started prairie planting, wasn't it? Because it was just supposed to be easy to maintain, and you put things in and they get on with it themselves.
If you put the right plants in, they do. I mean, they form a nice sort of thick carpet of perennials, and the grasses are very good for that as well.
Yeah.
And they're all strong growers. I mean, these are all good, strong plants that sort of you don't need to spend too much time fussing about with them.
Well, there's no staking, is there? There's no pressing with them at all, and they're all close to the species, so you know they're pretty disease resistant, trouble free.
Yep.
And I mean, most of them are sort of plants from northern climes, aren't they? Shorter day length actually induces them to flower.
It does, and this is their time to flower. I mean, the garden looks stunning at the moment. I mean, it's absolutely full of flower. And then it just goes on and on through the autumn. I think it's one of the nicest times of the year because the colours are just going over, but the grasses are doing their thing. We leave all the seed heads on, leave it up as long as possible so then the birds can benefit from the seed heads.
When do you cut them down?
February usually. It takes a couple of days, but just cut the whole lot with a strimmer.
Jump straight through the lot.
Yeah.
The great majority of these plants would enhance any garden. They're easy, straightforward, robust, they're beautiful. I grow this agastache in my own garden. You can start it easily from seed. It epitomises a garden like this because it's got this long season, it's wonderful for wildlife, and it changes marvellously all the time. Whatever you call this style of gardening, whether you refer to it as prairie gardening or naturalistic, there's absolutely no doubt that it's been the most influential style of gardening during the last 15 or 20 years. Now, the Millennium Gardens just reopened, and you know that this garden is going to provide not just a feast for our senses, but a feast for all those creatures who are lucky enough to live here.
It certainly does look beautiful, and I love the way those great drifts of grasses and species plants with their small flowers have such a big impact. Not just the way it looks too, it's the effect it has on the whole ecology of a garden, because they do attract in masses of insects that feast on the pollen and the nectar that they produce, and that's so important in our gardens. Now, certainly the key thing is that all of us gardeners can take part in this. We can plant something in our garden that's going to draw insects in. And at this time of year, it's not too bad. There are lots of plants that they love. But when you get very early in the year, it's much more tricky. And there are far fewer flowers open and fewer insects. So the combination of the two becomes more crucial. And I'm planting crocus here in the dry garden, which is very good for pollinating insects, particularly in February when they open. Now, this is Crocus thomasianus. It's one of the first to open. And like all crocus, the flowers will open out in the sunshine, and then they're available for the few insects that are about. And by the way, we have to change our mindset that insects are part of the goodness of the garden. They're not a problem, and that includes aphids. Every insect has a role to play, and we should be welcoming them into the garden. Now, of course, it's not just for the insects, however important that is. They're beautiful. Crocus are part of that song that comes out at the beginning of the year and draws you into the sort of slow movement from winter to spring. Now, they're very easy to plant. They need to go down about 2 or 3 times its own depth. They're little corms, they're flat, and if you can just get them in flat down, about an inch or 2 down in there, they will flower. And of course, not forgetting to go underneath plants like this acanthus, which will have died right back next February. Now you can hear the stone. This is very stony ground, but that means good drainage, and they'll like that. Well, I'm busy doing this. Joe is away sunning himself on holiday, but he's found time to visit an amazing garden in the Dordogne, which is about as different from this as could be imagined.
Well, it takes a lot to get me up this early, crack of dawn, when I'm on holiday. But what an incredible spot this is. It's amazing. Looking over the River Dordogne, the mist is rising, the light is just perfect. And look, we've got hot air balloons on cue. It's magical. Marqueyssac is a 17th century castle in southwest France, built on a ridge 130 metres above the valley floor. Originally it had very formal gardens, then its design was changed by Julien de Serval, who planted thousands of box. The gardens continued to thrive until just after the First World War, when gradually they fell into disrepair, until Kléber-Roussillon bought the land in 1996 and in just 1 year restored the gardens to the masterpiece that you see today. So a year's restoration, an incredible amount of work obviously happened here to turn it into this. But what was it like originally, this area of the garden?
Well, it used to be mixed borders, but the box grew very tall, so I came with a chainsaw and cut everything just tall, and you had just a piece of wood that tall, and from that it grew with round shapes. The garden developed itself, so I said, oh, that's nice. And after that I just told it, just do it more round, that's all.
When de Serval was laying out the space originally, what was he aiming for? Was it a traditional French style, would you say?
It was at that time, it was the new style which we call Napoleon III, Napoleon III. Yeah. And at that time they designed the round layout of all the parts.
Everything's always curved, there's no very few straight lines.
Yes. And he had his ideas from Italy.
You can see the influence there actually as you look back at that with the trees. It's so simple, isn't it? But it's just a stunning view. So there's no English influence here?
It was called the English style, but it is not English. I don't think so.
There's a bit of English style here. We like to use our box as well.
Jardin à l'anglaise.
Ah, jardin anglaise, oui. What about these yuccas? Were they here originally?
They were here, but the gardeners wanted me to cut them because they said that's not proper for a chateau. But my idea was to keep them because the spikes, which contrast with the round shapes of the box, that's Marqueyssac.
Marqueyssac is a combination of the highly manicured and the completely untamed, surrounded by some of the most stunning views in France. The woodland covers the majority of the park with plenty of views and little corners to rest or take in the atmosphere, and they're all linked together with the original box-lined alleys. I love this long tunnel here, again created out of box, but it's nice and cool when the sun beats down on you, isn't it? So how did this come about? Was this already here?
Oh, it was the small box hedge that grew loose for 150 years, so it became 20 feet tall.
And you just tied it together
and we just tried to bend them.
Yeah.
That is quite difficult to bend them, but we did it so to make this arch.
Yeah, it's beautiful. Oh, I love this part of the garden, Kléber. It just shows, it's putting the same elements, but in a different order in a way, and creating a real feeling of space. It's stunning.
We had to cut and prune the trees in order to have the light coming on the esplanade.
It's very different from the more busy box in the garden. It's got an identity all of its own.
Yes. In the park you have real different places with different atmospheres. Yeah.
This is much more contemporary, this part of the garden here.
Yes, it's in contrast with the round shapes of the bastion, and these blocks, they have just tumbled over the box hedge.
Yeah.
And that's just blocks which I design with my sugar cubes on breakfast.
So you designed this part of the garden?
Yes.
You're responsible. I think it fits perfectly. There's so much box in this garden. How much clipping is there to do here? And you must use machines to do it with.
No, it's just with hand shears all over. And it takes about, I would say, 8 people for 3 months for the whole park. But around the castle we do it 3 or 4 times a year.
What about the ones down on the side? Because it also spills down the mountainside. So how does that get looked after?
We have to clip the man a rope, taken in ropes, in order to assure that they do not fall.
I was wondering how that they maintain those. But also, the whole garden is made up, predominantly of box and of trees. But here, I can see you've actually introduced some flowers. Are you softening now? Are you going to put more flowers in?
We just have these plumbagos, and naturally we have the cyclamen for Naples, and these are the only flowers that we have.
That is it. Yeah.
You look at the shapes more than look at the color. It's an evergreen garden, which we can visit at any time of the year. So even in winter, it's very beautiful.
I thought that looked fantastic, and certainly I shall make my way to Marqueyssac as soon as I can. And if you want to see it, it is open every single day of the year. And what I loved most about that was the way that a simple idea was taken and then carried to an extreme. It wasn't really about box, it was about having a thought, a notion, and just making it fly. And that elevates gardening above the humdrum into something truly creative. Now this is obviously very, very different, but I hope there's creativity in it. Although I'm doing a very practical job at the moment, and that's moving a large herbaceous perennial. Normally you think of doing that in November or around March time. But there are a couple of advantages of moving herbaceous plants now. The first is that the soil is warm, so the roots in their new home will start to grow immediately, which means that next spring there's a good root system to support the new growth. The second advantage is because it's fully grown and in flower, you can see what it looks like in its new home. But the disadvantage is that it's very dry at this time of year. So having dug a hole, I shall now fill it full of water and let it soak away before moving the plant. The plant I want to move is a lovely one. There's nothing wrong with it at all, except that it's in the wrong place. So by moving it now, I hope to keep its loveliness and give it the home that it should have and look best in. Now it's this perennial helianthus. This is Helianthus lemon queen with these beautiful, tiny little sunflowers of a lovely lemon colour, and it's the lemon colour that's the problem. This is the jewel garden. We want rich jewel colours in here. Wall garden is planted up in pastel shades and white, so this would work perfectly in there. And to move it, I do need to cut it back. Let's cut the support off and get in there. These will make good cut flowers anyway. Now what's surprising is how relatively small a root system is supporting such an enormous amount of top growth. And I suppose that's a really good reason for doing it at this time of year, because if you move that in March, you'd have to be very experienced to judge exactly how much space it was going to fill. Anyway, this means I don't have to split it. It'll go straight into the hole I've made. there. Firm that in gently. Now give that another really good soak. That's it. Leave all the growing to go on underground, and then next March or April, that enormous above ground growth can begin. Right, that's a good job done. And here are another couple of slightly smaller jobs, but just as important, that you could do this weekend. Now that the days are getting shorter and the nights cooler, tomatoes are taking longer to ripen. To speed this process up, remove all the remaining foliage so that the plant's energy is solely directed towards the fruit. This might seem very dramatic, but the plants won't suffer and it will definitely help any green tomatoes to ripen. At this time of year, bad weather will cause a lot of damage in your borders, especially to tall plants that aren't properly staked. So check all your staking now, and if need be, add extra support or raise the stakes up. Not only will this support the plants, but also keep the garden looking spruce right into autumn. Now, a job I'll be doing, if not this weekend, certainly over the next week, is repairing the bare patches in lawns, which inevitably occur after a hard summer like this one. And this is a good time of year to do it because the seed will germinate very quickly and start to grow. And then by next spring, when it warms up, it'll very quickly become thick and ready for mowing. Now move out the way, Nige, because the first thing to do is just loosen it. Now the secret of all good grass is drainage. Now I'm going to add a little bit of sharp sand just for that reason, to improve the drainage. Come out of the way, that's a good boy. Go and get an apple. This time of year, Nigel goes around hoovering up apples and eating a huge amount every day. So it's just mixed in lightly. And rake it off. And the next stage is to sow it. Much better to sow than use turf in this sort of instance because seed is really cheap, and also, and this is the critical thing, you can choose what type of seed you use. Now this is actually a shady mix. It'll grow well in the lee of this hedge. Whatever type you use, just sow it thinly. That's perfectly okay. Rake it in. Right, I'll keep that moist and it'll germinate really fast and grow strongly, and by next spring you won't know that it's been repaired. And this technique applies whether you're repairing a small worn area the size of a saucer on a path or making a brand new lawn. Sowing seed in September is the quickest way to establish grass. Now we've run out of time and we shan't be back next week because there's athletics on. But I'll be back here at Longmeadow at our normal time in a fortnight, so I'll see you then. Bye-bye.